Basically, it's going to be much more well done in the Midwest and so forth. Okay, so I got a little blah. I didn't like how that one worked. Okay, I'll get into that in a little more depth later on. Those temperatures that we're shooting for. Okay, but desired result is going to be that golden brown crust and the doneness that the guest is looking for, and it's usually like a medium rare is what we're shooting for a red meat with poultry, turkey, chicken, duck, what have you. Oftentimes we're looking for well done on those. Cooked all the way, usually about 165 internal. Okay, let's see. The outside, like I said, delicious golden brown, delicious crust. Inside should be nice and moist and juicy. That's the other thing when we're doing poultry. It's really easy to dry that stuff out. So we're looking for a nice moist interior on that. Okay, and so that's kind of what roast is. Okay, again. Golden brown exterior. It's a dry heat method. Nothing but fat involved with this. Never liquid. And then we're looking for a desired doneness to whatever the guest is looking for. Okay. Now, roasting. It seems simple, right? It's just like it's a hot oven. You throw the meat in there. It's like this is a no-brainer. But there's actually a lot of stuff to bring to the table in this discussion, okay? It's actually kind of an art form, really nailing that perfect temperature every time, and you can really screw that up. You can have the right temperature inside and still dry out your roast if you do the wrong things, okay? So that's what we want to kind of talk about, how to get there, okay? Let's see, who's here? Oh, Vincent DeFore, good to see you. Danny Johnson, awesome, look at you. And Alicia Huffnagel, of all people. Let's see. So, like I said, roasting is pretty straightforward and simple. A dry heat in an oven, a hot oven, you put your meat in there, but there's so much more to it. Different ovens, for instance, okay? My oven here is just a kind of a crappy little standard gas oven, okay? You might have a crappy little electric oven. You might have a $1 million professional grade convection oven in your house. The bottom line here is the moral of the story. You're going to need to figure out how to roast with the equipment that you have, okay? There is not one answer to what the time and temperature is for a certain thing. There's not a trick. Oh, so how many pounds, how many minutes per pound or any of that stuff. Cooking is an active pursuit that you need to kind of be there for, and you need to kind of check it once in a while and poke it with a stick or check the temperature or whatever it is. But you can't just like read a recipe, it says 350 for 9 hours, and then just go away and start doing something else for 9 hours and come back and expect to have something that anybody wants to eat, right? So that's the bottom line here is you got to get used to your oven, and the only way to do that is to play with it. Do your reps, right? Like you're in a gym, do your reps. Play with your equipment and get it down and kind of be familiar with it, okay? Frank McCall, another old student, good to see you there. Let's see, different meat types, okay? So you'll have some cuts that are a firmer grain than other cuts, okay? If you look at the center of an animal, you've got the ribeye, your prime rib up front near the shoulder. Okay, I'm a cow. My students are all familiar with this. I always do this, right? I'm a cow. I got these cuts back here. They're all nice and tender and loose, grained and things like that. And then I start getting down here. This is where your New York's coming from, okay? And that's tighter meat. It's a tighter grain. And when you have a tighter grain, energy is going to work through that meat much more efficiently. You've got the loose grain, and that energy kind of dissipates as it's trying to move through that meat, right? So tighter grain meats are going to cook more efficiently than looser grain meats. Mind blown, right? Also, certain cuts are just not going to work for you. You know, you get a chuck roast or something like that. You can't just roast it at this 350. That's going to be one of those slow cook 11-hour roasts or something like that, right? Totally different animal right there. Different cuts of meat are going to cook differently. Different shapes of meat as well, right? Think about a flank steak. It's just kind of flat and wide, you know. I can have like a 5-pound flank steak that's all flat and wide, and it's about so wide. And then I could have another roast, basically, that's the shape and size of a soccer ball, basically, and they both weigh the same size. What's going to take longer to cook? The spherical one rather than the flat horizontal one, right? It's going to take a lot more time to cook that spherical one, and it's going to take a lot more skill to get a good temperature through and through for that one. So different shapes are going to affect it. And then, we talked about the structure as well. You'll have some cuts that might be tough over here, tender over there. They might have different grains, right? You've got like brisket where it's got a grain going this way and another grain going that way, so it's kind of tough to kind of carve once it's done and everything. All of these things kind of come into play. And then finally, we want to talk about a couple of different things, right? Your desired doneness, okay? What are you shooting for? We'll talk about some of those temperatures in a second. We also want to talk about carryover cooking. Some of you guys are probably very familiar with carryover cooking if you watch food TV, if you've ever seen anybody talking about roasting, right? The idea of carryover cooking. When you pull a roast out of the oven, think of a solid roast like a leg of lamb or a prime rib or something, right? You pull that out, and there is a lot of residual heat built up in that piece of meat, right? And that heat is still boring into the center of that meat and cooking as it goes, right? And so when we have these, what we'll do is we will pull our meats out early and let the meat continue to cook with that residual heat. This is what we're calling carryover cooking. It's literally still cooking that meat. Another thing that happens while this carryover cooking is happening is that meat has it has a circulatory system. It's a muscle, right? And there are juices in that meat that are kind of cruising around in that circulatory system while it's cooking, and they're under a little bit of pressure as the heat is building up, right? So as those juices are flowing around, we want to give them an opportunity to kind of settle back into the meat once it comes out, right? So what I'm talking about is, I pull a piece of meat out. There's residual heat built up in that thing, and it's still cooking towards the center, right? And it's got that circulatory pressure built up inside of there. If I take that roast, put it on a cutting board, and cut it right in half right now, all of the juices that are under pressure in there are all just going to flow right out, right? And so we have what we call it resting time. We pull a roast out of the oven, we let it sit. We'll pull that out early, I should say. We'll pull a roast out early, we'll let it sit, and the residual cooking, the carryover heat, will continue cooking that roast until it's done. During this resting time, we're also allowing that pressure to stop rolling around inside and calm down and let those juices settle into the meat, okay? So when we cut it open, the juices all don't spill out all over the place, okay? So this idea of carryover heat lets us take in this concept of resting time. It gives us time to let the juices settle into the meat. It lets that carryover heat cook the meat the rest of the way. And then another thing that it lets us do, this idea of this residual cooking and all of this, it gives us an excuse to make some gravy, because while this is all happening, this resting time and everything, hey, what are you gonna do? Pick the lint out of your navel, right? Get over there and make a gravy, make a little sauce or something for your bird, okay? And so while this resting is happening, you can crank out a little gravy in about 10 or 15 minutes, and then by the time your gravy's done, your roast is ready to serve. And that's how Thanksgiving has worked since the days of the cavemen, okay? So yeah, let's see what else I got on my little speechify here, okay? Let's talk about that desired doneness, okay? Now, we use a meat thermometer to kind of gauge the temperature on the inside of the roast, okay? When I'm looking at that temperature, usually it's the tip of the thermometer that's kind of gauging this, and I want to get the tip of the thermometer into the deepest part of the muscle, and my massive bicep, it'd be way down in there, right? And we get that tip into the very, very center, and then we take that reading, and then we know what the internal temperature is, and then we can kind of judge what we're looking for, okay? Now, what am I looking for? Most people are looking for about a medium rare on a roast, right? If we're talking red meats, right? When I'm looking at red meats, I will be shooting for about 130 to 135. I said that earlier, right? So I'm temping for that. If I want medium, if I want to take it another step up, like we might see like we might enjoy in St. Louis, Missouri or something like that in the Midwest, where they want it cooked a little bit more, right? We're looking for about 135 to 145. In California, That's what I'd call a medium right there, okay? And so that's kind of the idea with your degree of doneness. Most people aren't looking for a super rare roast or anything like that. Most people aren't looking for a super well done roast, okay? When we are temping these meats, again, medium rare, 130 to 135, and then the medium was 135 to 145. That's a 10-point spread on that one. The other one was 5, okay? By the way, about 145, 155, medium well, anything above 155, let's just call that well done. Don't you guys think? Let me get a little sip here. Yeah, you guys doing okay? Mazel tov. I hope everybody's doing great. This is where I need the band. A snappy band. Playing snappy tunes. What I want to do right now, before I get into any more of this business, I want to go ahead and pull out my roast and let's take a look at it. I'm going to go ahead and give it a little baste. And what am I going to baste it with? I got a little of my rendered animal fat that I use for pretty much everything. Anything I'm cooking around here, I'm making a stock, anything like that, I save the fat off the top of that and I'm using it for cooking. So again, I said it earlier, there's a little bacon fat in this, there's a little bit of chicken fat, there's some duck fat in there. Thank God for duck fat, don't you guys think? Don't you think? I love the duck fat, okay? So this is just a nice flavorful fat that I'm gonna use for basting, okay? What's a fat I don't wanna use? Gosh, I don't know, coconut oil might be a little weird on there, might make it taste like Thai food, but if I wanted to do a red curry roasted chicken, I can make a little mixture of coconut oil and curry spices and things like that and be brushing that on my chicken as it roasts, right? Why not? Let me pull out this bird and we'll take a look. So really not a ton of color there. I might just bump up my oven a little bit because again, I've got kind of a crappy little home oven here. It's not all that great. So I'm gonna take mine from 350 and I'm gonna experiment a little bit with 400 here. This bird, even got a little pre-sear too, and it's still just not jumping around much in there. So I gotta crank this puppy up. Oh, what am I doing? I pulled it out so I could baste it. Let's do this. Now, as you're pulling it out, I wanna caution you, make sure that you are closing that oven door right up, okay? When you open that oven door, that just drives me crazy. People will open that door and just sit there and like, hey chef, what do you think about this over here? And it's just like, close your freaking door, man. You're losing all your heat in there. Especially if it starts getting hot in the summertime. What do you want to do? Heat up your whole house, right? So as soon as you pull that bird out, close that door. When you put the bird in, shut that door. Don't slam it. Be nice, okay? But we can't go around just leaving our oven doors open. Same thing with your refrigerator, okay? We're trying to save the planet here. So in she goes. She's all nicely basted. And away we go. That bird's still going. It smells like bacon fat in here. It smells really good. It's going to be bacon chicken. Two great animals that taste great together. Finally. Let's see. Getting back to the lecture part of this, okay? That was just a little repartee there. So, we just got done talking about carryover heat. We just got done talking about resting, how those juices need to kind of settle into the meat before we cut into it and everything, right? So, other things with roasting technique, okay? Season those meats a day ahead. Like I said, work that seasoning into the meat so it gets a chance to penetrate. If you're trying to do a roast and you just pull it out and slap a little salt on there and go, yeah, it'll be a little salty on the outside, but it's not going to penetrate very far, okay? It's the same thing if I'm making potato salad. I got to really work a lot of seasoning into that stuff to really penetrate the actual potato pieces. I don't want just seasoning on the outside. I want it seasoned through and through, okay? And that's how you cook, right? And so season those meats a day ahead to help contribute to that flavor, allow those seasonings to penetrate for you, okay? Trust the meats to allow them to maintain shape, okay? I could actually show you a couple of little trussing knots since we got time here and you guys aren't going anywhere, right? Let me wash my hands and let's truss a little something. Just in case you wanted to truss a bird.